Welcome everybody to another episode of the Perceptive Podcast here on Game Wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games. My guest tonight is a developer with a very long and illustrious background when it comes to game dev. He helped co-create the Vampire the Masquerade tabletop game. He is currently working on the enhanced edition to the classic 4X game Emperor of the Fading Suns. And I'm sure I'm going to have a lot to talk about tonight. So please welcome to the podcast from Holistic Design Inc., Andrew Greenberg. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me. Glad I didn't blow my perception roll on getting onto this. Comes close. I might be the least perceptive person out there, but really glad to be here.
Yep. And thank you again, Andrew, for reaching out when I put out the call for any developers. As I was telling Andrew and to everyone listening and watching, I'm always looking for guests for this series. So if you're working on a game or just want to chat game dev, I would love to have you on. So please reach out. But we certainly have a lot to talk about tonight. So I already kind of gave like the quick, I guess, the Cliff's notes about your background. But for the people watching, can you talk a little bit more about kind of like who you are and what have you done when it comes to game dev?
Sure, absolutely. As you noted, I was the original Vampire the Masquerade developer at White Wolf from 90 to 95. We launched that game in 91. Worked on Werewolf, did the magic system kind of in 48 hours. Crazy bit of story there. The Street Fighter role-playing game, but left with some very good people to start Holistic Design in 95. Bill Bridges, the original Werewolf developer, amongst them. And from that, we formed the Fading Suns tabletop game. We did the Emperor of the Fading Suns computer game. A lot of other great computer games, Warhammer 40K, Final Liberation, Multi-Coon, tons of good stuff. And are back doing enhanced versions of our older titles. Worked on a number of titles in between. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I currently run the Georgia Game Developers Association. So work with everybody around the state making games. And that's really become a pleasure, a great opportunity. A lot of chance to support other great game devs. In fact, Tuesday, we just ran our Best in Georgia contest for college teams that have involved in the Global Game Jam, and 5 finalist teams out of more than 100 that started. You had some really good games we showed off on Tuesday. So it's really great getting the opportunity to work with all kinds of game devs.
Nice. And other things that I do is I reach out to different states about doing like library and school talks about game dev. And always happy to talk with places about that. And I'm curious, like for Georgia, like how is the game dev space there? Because usually when we talk about like game dev in the United States, it's always, California, Texas, Bethesda, and even like New York. But how is it going over there?
Well, Georgia is in the top 10 states for game development. And that is a relatively recent change, certainly within the last 20 years. Well, I've been making games here since 1990. There have been times when my studio was one of only 2 in the entire state, especially in the year 2000 and recession really killed the industry. But one of the good things we have here, a lot of folks know of Georgia as the home to the movie industry because there are credits set up to support films here. That same tax credit program applies to video games. So that started in 2005, and we just had a wonderful growth of studios since then. That's when High Res Studios, it does Smite, great esports title, started up. Same with Tripwire Interactive, which does Killing Floor and Red Orchestra. Other great titles, Maneater, Chivalry, love all of them. They all start up at that same time. So the state made a concerted effort, knowing that a good game development community was essential to a strong tech community. This is what gets kids into technology. They want to make games. And without it, they just leave. And we're having horrible brain drain. Great schools here, but horrible brain drain. Now we're keeping a lot of those folks there. The association, we track more than 160 studios around the state. Of course, some of them are very big. Most of them are very small studios, small indies, but we love them. We just did a big event called the Columbus Interactive Media Fest in Columbus, Georgia. Not a place many people think of, but had a lot of great game dev conversations out there as well. So it is definitely growing. The association's about 600 people, and we do an economic impact report, and we figure there are about 4,000 people now in the state doing games with sim dev, and that's just a tremendous change and a great deal of creativity.
That is good to know. I've been contacting like state by state, like libraries about doing like talks on game dev. So I'll have to reach out to Georgia after we're done.
Absolutely. We got more than 20 colleges with game dev and related programs. Esports is a varsity sport on the state level through the Georgia High School Association. So just every aspect of it is of interest. We work with some of the libraries. Some of the libraries here do game jams now.
Nice.
In fact, I think the Gwinnett County, I'm in DeKalb County, Gwinnett's right above me. They're doing a game jam right now, I think. I'll have to dig up info and send it to you. And they do, this isn't their first. They've done multiple of these with good prizes and some great products being made.
Very cool. And really great to hear. Again, like, I've been talking about game dev in the industry now since like 2012, so I've had to kind of grow, and I've always been like watching how things have grown. It's really nice to hear when a lot of places have been growing their game dev scene. Like, I'm based out of New Jersey, and it's still been like relatively slow goings over here, and it's definitely been like a challenge. I guess this is kind of, I guess like on and kind of off topic at the same time, but like for yourself, like watching like the Georgia game dev scene, like what has been like, do you have any like advice for any like educators or developers like trying to like grow the space in their respective areas?
Yeah, it requires everybody actually getting together and working together. The schools know that the students want it. They know this is what will get students in technology. If the kids never make games, it'll give them the skills. It'll give them great jobs and great quality of life. Some people might argue that right now working in games isn't the best quality of life. I still love it. Been doing it for way too long. But it requires the schools get involved. I'm on the advisory board for the State Department of Education. That's K through 12 computer science board. And we work closely with them in order to ensure that there's a pipeline that'll keep kids interested in technology all the way through, and that there are opportunities when they go into colleges. And then got to bring in the hobbyists and the pros together to say, hey, look, we can work with kids, do internships, even if we'll never hire them for whatever reason. Let's show them what they can actually do. And it really has to be a combined conversation. I started the Southern Interactive Entertainment and Game Expo, Siege, back in 2007. It's still running. We're now partnering with DreamHack to do stuff there. And it is the place to bring it all together. All of these groups need to understand that they need to come together in order to make a really sustainable environment for game development in their communities. And there's no reason New Jersey can't have something like that.
I'm definitely if anyone from New Jersey is trying to do something like that, would like me to help, I am here for it.
Oh, and I advise groups like from Belgium and others on how to set up these nonprofits to do it. So if you do decide to do it, glad to figure out how to help you out.
Yep, and as you said, it's very important to like show kids and give them like a chance to make something. And that has been like one of the best things that has happened to the game dev space in the last like 14 years has been the kind of more proliferation of public game engines. Right, Unity, Godot, Unreal, and so on. Like, I've seen games from like first timers and students that have been really impressive in terms of what they can do. Like, are they putting out, Star Citizen, No Man's Sky level? No, but you can definitely see like the creativity at work, and I think that's always what you want to cultivate, especially at a younger age.
Yeah, you are absolutely right on that. I mean, so we've been doing our Best in Georgia contest with the colleges. Not quite a decade yet, but for a number of years. And the quality of games, every year I would say the games got better. But I realized, the games every year are just getting better. This year, the top 3 games in it could have won pretty much any previous year. And we had previous winners say, oh, yeah, that's better than what I turned in. And the tools are getting better. The kids are getting sharper, I believe. And the teachers are understanding what's involved better than they ever have before, and are sharing that knowledge even more effectively. So it's all coming together, and you're absolutely right. Some of these college products, so I actually taught Unreal Tournament back in the mid-aughts, and that was a beast. That was horrible. People hated it. And now Unreal is a dream to play around in and do stuff with. So the tools have gotten better, but I think that people have a better understanding. Things like extra credits, if you remember that online show, that influenced so many people into game dev, but also clued them into what was really involved. Because most people, when they make their first game, it is utter garbage. But that's become less and less the case because people have a much better understanding thanks to things like extra credits. So it's a multitude of reasons.
Yep, and like for the stuff I do here on Game Wisdom, I put out game design videos every week. I talk about all manner of variety of topics, and a lot of it is just educating people that there's more to a game than just watching a guy go left to right, or that it's actually very hard to make something feel good in the player's hands. And I can talk about UI UX and just pick a genre until like probably like a few weeks from now, we could just sit here and chat on that topic. And it really is like a very diverse, interesting conversation. I've This past week alone, I've had 4 different developer interviews with people both like relatively new in the game dev space and people who've had like 10, 15 years. And you can have like the same topic and have like a completely different conversation.
Absolutely.
It's phenomenal.
You're absolutely right. You hit the controller on the X button. We have our own Georgia Game Devs YouTube channel. We got about 600 videos up there, and I'm amazed. I mean, some of them will get like 40,000 views, and then we'll put up things like accessibility for the visually impaired, and very happy that it gets a few hundred views. So, and we have the similar topic from different people, completely different points of views, but great information each time.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's another interesting question for you, Andrew. Like, I think getting people interested in learning game design has definitely been kind of an uphill battle. Like, for like my channel, I don't do like a lot of I rarely do like anything clickbaity. Like, you're not going to find the game industry is dead or dying videos. But I have videos like how to make randomization fun in a roguelike, or what is good feel in an action game. And it's like, okay, that's an interesting topic, but it doesn't exactly like roll off the tongue as so and so is murdering the game industry. And it is and I still feel, and I guess this is a good question for you with both a background in the space and kind of like the education space on this. I feel like we're getting like a slow but surely more acceptance and appreciation of studying game design. Like, I've been doing my library talk since about 2018. And over like the last, oh my goodness, almost, wow, I've lost track of how many years now it's been. Like, I've seen more and more places, I think, be excited about game design. Like, when I started, it's kind of like pulling teeth at libraries. Like, it's about learning game design. No, they're not just going to sit here and play video games for an hour. And now I contact some place and like, hey, I want to do something about game design. Like, yes, get in here. Like, we want it. So, for you, like, do you feel like it has also been growing in terms of like acceptance and appreciation of learning kind of what goes into a game these days?
Yeah, you are absolutely right about that. The difference is phenomenal. I actually lobby on behalf of the game industry here in Georgia, and the response between when we started and now is night and day. We started, it was very much, we don't want our grandkids doing that. And now they understand the importance of the industry and why it needs a place at the table. And we're talking about computer science education in the schools and so on. The growth of it in schools. And as a side note, the acceptance of the game design major now. I remember in the late 90s and early aughts, no company wanted a game design major. They wanted you to have a CS degree. They didn't. The game design majors had no credibility coming on in. And then games like Portal suddenly came out. So these kids make Portal. It's originally a Flash game. And everybody in the industry loves Portal, and Valve hires these kids with their game design degrees right out of school, makes Portal into this incredible thing, and other kids get hired, and suddenly game design degrees have actual credibility within the industry. We have legitimate studies on how good is a place like Georgia Tech, SCAD Savannah, University of California, et cetera. How good are their game programs? But I think the main change we're seeing is that folks like you and me are now in those places of authority. We've been gamers our entire lives. We know the value of games. We know games contributed very positively to our lives. Mm-hmm. And as they come in, and now they're legislators who are serious gamers that I can talk to, whether I agree with them politically or not, we can argue about games all day long and have a great time with it. We've gotten to the point where the gamer is everyone. If you're not a gamer, you're not just an oddity. You're a weird oddity. You're way out there. You might as well be hanging out in your mom's basement and not deal with real people in society like us gamers.
Yeah.
So that's helped a lot. The gamers have gotten to that point and they realize the value of what is in these interactive products.
Yeah, like when a few of the libraries I reach out to, like I talk to the librarian, like, oh yeah, I'm going to home. I'm going to play Elden Ring after I'm done with this.
Oh,
And
excellent.
it's kind of like when you're like a child and you hear like your teacher, like like a rock band, or he's a skateboarder, or they do games like that. And like you said, it really has been like that generational change that a lot of us who obviously play video games back in the 80s and 90s grew up. And we didn't grow out of game dev or out of video games. We want to do more of it. And what you just said about kind of like having the computer science degree, like that is like a knife in my chest. Because when I graduated college back in like 2006, 2007, they were like, oh, we're going to phase out our computer science program. Like, you're going to be the last class. We're never going to do it again. And then, like, a year or two later, they're like, oh, people like video games. Let's have a video game degree now. I'm just sitting there going, could I have like waited like one more year to graduate? It would have been perfect for me.
Yeah, I'd love to have had the tools that kids have now back when I was starting this. They are, I mean, our after the Fading Suns game we're doing now, part of the issue behind it is this is our old proprietary engine.
Mm-hmm.
Dates back from our very first game, Battles of Destiny, we released in the early 90s. We built on this old code. And I mean, it was a beast then when we were fully immersed in it. It's like, trying to update it now is I mean, it's got old assembly code. It's of course mainly C++. It's not Unreal. It's not the beauty of the Unreal Engine now. It's not the beauty. I know there are people cursing at Unity every day now, but that's still a fun engine to do stuff in. Yep. So, boy, man, the tools, the opportunities, and I would love to have access to them. But hey, we did great things with what we had.
Mm-hmm. And I think like so much about design has really changed as well. Like again, as I said a few minutes ago, I can talk about UI UX for hours and hours on hand, and we've really been seeing like a lot more developers try to make their games far more approachable over the past 10 years, especially again like strategy, 4X, turn-based. Like again, like I grew up in the 90s. I remember the likes of XCOM, the original XCOM, and like the one that you can say about XCOM is that if you didn't play it back then, do not can play it there because it is rough to look at. And I think a lot of it has been, again, like this growing acceptance and appreciation of game design fundamentals, about understanding what makes an attractive GUI. How do you get a good feel on your game? And like this is the kind of stuff that, again, it sounds very hard. And I literally just had this conversation with someone the other day who does design consulting. Like, when we talk about, like, people understand design, it sounds super simple. We can explain this stuff like it's nothing. But if you don't have that background, you're just looking from the outside in, we might as well be speaking another language. And to your point earlier about how much, like, students and college students have really grown and become better at it, I think a lot of that has been people who have been playing games today have a really sharp eye towards what makes good game design. I have played games from people who it's literally their first like official game project, and it's phenomenal. And it's not because they, went to a college and got like a 4 or 5 year degree in game design. It's just that I played all these games, I studied all these games. I'm like, well, if I study these games, I can now figure out what do I want from these designs. And it has been, again, fascinating to see just how much design has really changed over the past 10 years.
Yeah, it absolutely has. Going back with our older game, with Emperor of the Fading Suns, our old strategy games, the idea was to give players all these different variables they could tweak, all these options they could do, windows after windows after windows. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at them, and it's like, oh, I got to go into another window to fix this, to set this within the game. And nobody does that. But that was Civilization, XCOM. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yes.
The depths you had to go into. I got my research screen. I got my equip screen. I got them on a plane. We're on a boat. All of the fun of that. I loved XCOM. We loved working with Microprose. They published our Machiavelli the Prince game, and we're supposed to have been our Emperor of the Fading Suns publisher before they got bought out. Machiavelli the Prince did quite well with them. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, just what was good then, so different. And I remember when we used to do our stuff was kind of based on old tabletop board games. So you had the square counter equivalent of figures that would move around a hex grid. And then out comes SSI with the whole Panzer General type stuff. And they're suddenly making these really beautiful maps and units and like, and it's, our old chiclet design does not stand up anymore. Time to upgrade. And then we did our Warhammer 40K title, our first one that really had 3D art in it. It's like, well, it's definitely a more attractive thing to play in.
Mm-hmm. And I guess this will probably be a good time to talk more about Emperor then, because we can, again, we're not careful, we'll be here who knows how many hours.
Right.
So, for Emperor, could you talk a little bit about kind of like what is the game like? What makes it stand out as a 4X?
Sure. So we launched this with Sega of all people. Sega in the mid 90s created a PC division. This was the time, of course, Doom and others and Warcraft, etc. were doing such great sales, and Sega said it needed to move into the PC market. For those of you who don't know, Sega used to make consoles.
Ooh,
But anyway.
you just like stabbed me in the chest there as someone who was there 99.99.
Yeah. So we did Emperor the Fading Suns was supposed to be a PC, their entry into the PC strategy game market. Unfortunately, their other PC games did not do well. Apparently, at that time, we were easily their best-selling game, and it wasn't the biggest of numbers. But the idea behind it was a far future science fantasy war game based on our Fading Suns tabletop game, and actually it's a prelude to the tabletop game. You do the Emperor Wars, and at the end of the Emperor Wars, one person, Emperor Alexius, in our official history, becomes emperor, and then the PCs in the tabletop game get to start playing around the ruins, trying to put it all back together as usually one of his questing nights. Mm-hmm. So the game had a number of areas which were fairly breakthrough for the time. It allowed combat not just in space and not just on planet, but you could have planet to space combat as well as combat on air and on water. So we had navies, you had air forces, you had ground combat, you had planet to space weapons, you had orbital weapons that could fire down on the planets, you had ships that could just battle in space, etc. Had a very elaborate tech tree. So for those of you who don't know, it's a 4X game, and 4X classically means explore. Yeah, all right. It's the 4 E's, but we use X because X is sexier than calling it a 4E game. Yes, I got a 4E game. No, it's a 4X game. All right. So explore, where you start exploring where the resources are, the enemies, etc., learning the map. You expand your control of resources. In our case, there's all sorts of different things you harvest or fiefs that you take over to produce the things you need for war. You exploit these resources to build up your capacity, generally to make war, and then you exterminate the fourth X. Really, you don't necessarily exterminate. Our game, you don't have to kill the opponents. It leads to the diplomacy engine, but you exterminate their ability to become emperor, and you do become the emperor. We added a fifth X we called context. I know, really messed it up at that point. But we thought that a strategy game, we came out of the era of games like Empire, if anyone remembers that one. Great war game, but absolutely no context for it. You're just fighting for the sake of fighting. And we did our Battles of Destiny game, was very much similar to that. And then we started adding a little bit of context. Then with Emperor the Fading Suns, we have this whole universe that you're exploring and learning about, and people love the writing that is that's in the game. So that was added to a big tech tree. You could explore all sorts of freaky technologies to develop, and we had a bunch of alien races who weren't integral to the war, but you could deal with in various ways, or who would come in and just attack you and mess things up if you weren't very careful with your if you didn't learn your vow psychology and how to deal with the symbiotes and so forth. The whole Fading Suns universe actually came out of a conversation at the CGDC. This was the Computer Game Developers Conference before GDC was a thing. This is what turned into GDC. And 4 of us were sitting at the bar there discussing what would religion look like in the far future. And we had a great conversation with it. Maybe the conversation wasn't as good as the drinks we had made us think it was, but it made us really want to make a game. To be honest, what we ended up shipping had nothing like what we discussed at that table. But that's how game dev will go. Things will iterate and change on you before you even know it. So religion is a key part of it. You have the various sects who are competing for it. You have to keep the patriarch happy along the way. You don't want the church fleets coming after you either. You can sell out and be be an underling to the church, or you can try and declare the Third Republic and be basically rebelling against the religious influence. So we had a lot of fun with that aspect of the game as well. The diplomacy engine is very strong in the game. You can make all sorts of offers or threats and get all sorts of things in response, and the AI will make you a wide variety of diplomatic offers. And really, you usually need to be as effective in the diplomacy as you are in the combat in order to get elected emperor in the end and win the game. So we'd had fun with the diplomatic engine in our Machiavelli the Prince game. Clearly, a lot less combat, a lot more diplomacy, and we built on that for EFS. But again, the heart of the game is that you explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. We have an interstellar map. You start on one planet. You slowly have to gain control of that planet for your royal house. Then you go off planet and start getting control of more resources on other planets. This will put you into conflict with the other royal houses and maybe the alien races if you're not careful. And you are trying to expand over them. There are diplomatic offices that you can get as on your way up. There's an Imperial fleet. There's a Stigmata garrison. There's the Imperial Eye spy garrison. And you can trade these back and forth between players. It is a 5-player game and can be either 1 player versus 4 AI or 5 players playing. Yay! Play by EM. Who remembers play by email? You can even pass around a floppy disk if you wanted to pass your save game around. And we really love how the diplomacy happens in the multiplayer games. There are these discords set up for folks doing multiplayer games, which are just, oh my gosh, the stories that are being developed of why people are fighting each other and whose fault it is that the symbiotes are invading human space and who upset the patriarch this time. Just becomes fascinating, and it's very funny. I've got a number of videos up of my playthroughs and discussions of the games, and it's always these weird things that happen and people talking about how that fits into the tabletop game context or not, and what that means. That they get the most discussion every time. So the idea was, we weren't trying to be like a kitchen sink game, put everything in, but we had areas that we loved as gamers. We knew we wanted the heart of a classic 4X. We love those 4 elements. We wanted the context on top of it, and we wanted to enjoy the diplomacy, that back and forth. It should never just be exterminate the other person. It should be, what kind of deals can we make? What kind of fun can we have along the way?
Mm-hmm. And there's another bit of an oldie element from some of these games. I remember people writing after action reports for XCOM. That was one of my favorite things, just reading the entire story of how you missed that 190% shot and it caused everything to go out.
And you lost that one person you'd been keeping from the beginning. You'd done everything to keep her alive all the way through, and then, oh man, this is as bad as when the dog dies in Fallout.
Mm-hmm. And with the Emperor, in terms of the scale, that's another thing that I find very interesting, especially about the 4X genre, is trying to keep the game, I guess, a cohesive. When we're talking about, you can go from planetary layer to galactic layer, or to galaxy layer to galaxy layer, universe layer. I guess in terms of building that, how do you even start thinking about your game in terms of, okay, we're gonna go from 2 guys fighting on a planet to armadas in space battling?
No, that's a great way to look at it, because juggling that and then being able to do random maps in that makes it even more crazy. We don't just say, all right, we've got everything perfectly balanced, now we'll throw it out there. So no, let's make it all crazy and make it sure that it's still fun for people to enjoy. There are a number of areas that matter. One of the things that's interesting in this kind of game, really in all games, but especially in strategy games, is what is a resource. So, there's a classic discussion now that the main resource in most mobile games now is time. And that's what most people buy. You're buying a potion, you're really buying more time to play the game. If you're buying powers, whatever, usually they're just giving you more time. But in this game, it's what are the important resources? We've got your actual nobles within your house. Those people who could actually become emperor. You've only got 5 of them, so you got to safeguard them. But they're critical to have in certain places. So you have to put them at risk and not. You've got railroad tycoon style. You've got basic resources you grow, but then you have to put them somewhere else to turn them into a better resource. So in Railroad Tycoon, ore would turn to steel, would turn to, I don't remember what else. But in our games, you'll start with metals and trace metals and the like, and they'll start turning into your ceram steel, and your energy mining will turn into chemicals, and all of these will start turning into weapons or monopoles or into the ability to actually make ships that can fly interstellar, go through our jump gates, and so forth. So you're making decisions about what resources go where, how you use them, and so forth. Am I using this engineer to build more resource generating things? Does it need to build a factory for more weapons? Do I need to build more labs to do the research? Is the tech going to be key to this game? A lot of it comes down to, as one producer I used to work with always called them, those juicy choices. What are those choices you just want to sink your teeth into? You've got so many good options, and what you decide on is going to matter for the course of the game. What is going to be my most satisfying experience making a choice of using this resource, getting this, applying this, etc.? And how do we give players as many as possible without overwhelming them? And I'll admit that sometimes we would start leaning towards that overwhelming them side of it, but generally that's exactly what they wanted. You love that moment of just your brain is constantly going. I think this is part of how we get into flow states in games. Our games are just involved in all these wonderful choices. Every choice is satisfying minute making, and we always want to see the outcome of it. So our brain just stays in that flow state. We go and we go and we go. So how do we encourage those sorts of juicy choices on the parts of the players? How do we encourage them to look at a number of different options and decide what is best for them and their long-term strategy? How do we get them to tie their short-term tactics to a longer-term game plan? All of those are a big part of it. And then you say, all right, what's the play field for this? How do we make this as big and fun for them as possible? We don't expect you to conquer every 40 planets that might be out there. That is not the goal. We don't want you to ever have to just sit there and slog on through it. But we want you to have fun building up the resources you need to get to that point. And we always talk about in games, I mean, there's that early game, explore stage. People talk about the 3-act play. I like the 4-act game. I think that works out very well. And I think 4X, it works very well for games that aren't strategy games as well. I want to explore my play environment. I want to figure out what my options are. When I talk about exploring, getting rid of fog of war, learning resources that's part of it. But really, I'm exploring to learn what are my choices and what could the results of those choices be. Now I'm expanding my ability to make interesting choices. By getting more resources, I can do more. I can have more fun things happen. I've got all these new options that open up to me. Exploit means now I get to exploit those decisions I've made before to get to an end state of the game. And exterminate really is, how do I get to a satisfying end state of the game that really I find a good reward for all those hours I put into it along the way. And frankly, just slogging through, defeating every planet. Sometimes it's fun. I used to date a girl who in Empire liked to try and have a military unit cover every hex of the map. That was her perfect end state for the game. But for me, it's about, I've pushed through, I've built, I've seen all this great stuff happen, and I have to overcome some final hurdle, and now I've won. And that is a satisfying play experience.
And as you describe, kind of giving the player more choices and letting them build that up, it sounds or echoes a lot of what I like about like modern roguelike design. With a lot of these games, allowing the player just to, you start with something really cool, and then you start putting together, okay, now I have this new card, or this new item that then magnifies this, or it gives me this option. And then suddenly we're just, like, off to the races. And I think, like, for me personally, what has always kept me from playing a lot of the 4X games has just been this just assault of everything that you can do all at once. As anyone who's played, like, a Europa Universalis or a Paradox Software kind of game, it always feels like you're just kind of, like, thrown to the wolves. And again, with someone with a lot of thought about 4X design, like, what do you think has been like some of like the challenges or anything that you've tried or have solved in terms of like onboarding or just presenting the player with all this stuff?
No, and I'm not going to say I've come up with the perfect answer to it. What we did in Emperor of the Fading Suns was very different from Civilization style, where you start with like that one settler.
Mm-hmm.
In Emperor of the Fading Suns, you're already the leader of a noble house, so you had powerful units. You had fiefs that were already producing things. You had a lab already researching tech. You might already start with technologies. So the idea of just starting you with nothing, we took the flip side. You start with some good power. It's not easy to replace. This is the Dark Ages in space setting. So you're going to want to kind of keep those early units safe. You have to risk them, but you don't want to risk them stupidly if you're going to succeed. But we want to start you with something. This led to a different issue, which you perfectly touched on, which is people then feeling overwhelmed. There's so much going on. We put in Temper of the Fading Suns, I'll admit, a way too deep tutorial. Everything gets covered in our tutorial. I need to do a nice streamlined tutorial that says, here are the high spots. Now go explore and have fun. But there is the old method in games, which is, well, it's the classic progression chart. And we try to do this in Emperor of the Fading Suns too, where the player's ability should stay in sync, this curve, with the game's complexity and difficulty and the challenges that they're facing. So when you don't know anything about the game, it starts down here. The challenges start down low, as does the player knowledge. As the player knowledge and ability grows, so do the challenges. And the idea is they're really waves rather than curves. I mean, it's not a straight line, it's back and forth. But you want them to stay in sync. If a player gets too good for a game, they're going to get bored and stop playing it. If the game gets too hard for the player, they're going to get frustrated and stop playing it, which is either one you want to avoid having happen. So trying to do that player progression curve well is always a tricky question. So in EFS, we specifically gave you a lot of really good units to do things with, and this giant universe. You could start going off planet immediately if you wanted to, but then there'd be rebels on your planet who would make you pay for that. And come take your stuff. You could explore out through the planet, deal with the rebels, kind of the general way folks do so, and learn about combat along the way. You start with this initial enemy, the rebels on your home planet, who aren't that tough, but can pose a threat if you don't deal with them quickly. There are, of course, ruins to explore, because this is a far future humanity where humanity has collapsed. Humanity reached the stars, created the perfect society, and then messed it all up. And you're now left in the ruins, and there are literal ruins to explore and find cool things with. So that level of exploration is always fun too. And technology, you start with one lab. You don't have much ability to do technology. You can try. Diplomacy, you don't have much to trade and offer early on, but you'll still try and do some things. So we violated a cardinal rule, which is kind of that do one thing, learn it, do another thing. We gave you a whole bunch of things you could do only a little bit of, play around in, and it wouldn't kill you if you didn't mess with them. If you didn't do diplomacy early, no problem. You'll learn it later on. People will be making your offers. You'll be making you offers. If you're not doing the best resource exploration, it's okay. You've got time. You've got a merchant agora you can buy stuff from. If you're not making enough money, that's fine. You can sell things to the merchant agora and make money. We put a bunch of safeguards under them. And some people still feel overwhelmed by just the idea of how many choices you have can be a barrier. So I've learned that there's just so much out there. We thought, yeah, you can ignore them. Don't worry about them. People say, but they're choices. I must do something. And that was a mindset that is real and is legitimate. I'm not making fun of it. It's a real mindset. Yep. And we should have taken into better account at the time. But giving everyone little choices to make in a lot of areas early on, I think it helped a lot with this game, because for the people with whom it clicked, it's like, there is so much I can do. I want to do it all. And they play it over and over again, trying to get exactly that. And then we give modding tools so that modders can go out and give them even more.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like the point about like kind of like progression, like built into challenge, that is something that again is like very unique among like turn-based and kind of like 4X style games. Like right now I'm writing my next book on real-time strategy design, so I'm playing old Command & Conquerors again, and all those.
Westwood.
Yes,
good old Westwood.
I know. And like the beauty about them is they can start you off on mission 1 saying, okay, here's an infantry, here's a power plant, that's all you get. And then by the end of the game, okay, you have your entire base, here's your super weapons, here's your jetpack guys, go nuts. And it works really well to give the player that sense of, okay, I know how all these little individual things work because they're forcing me to use them in these early levels. But there's always been like the challenge for 4X games for someone like coming from the outside is again this idea of, okay, you're giving me the full diplomacy, the full trading, the full research, and build your entire planet, and now you have to go out. And it's always hard to, I think, define to the player what should your focus be, turn one. And again, like to your point about onboarding, something that I felt a lot of these games, it's always been difficult to tell the player, okay, how do you start one of these games? Like, I have a friend who's been trying to get me to play the Total War series, and like Total War has been like one of those things that's just been like above my head for years, and it is very challenging, I think, from the outside to look at these games going, wait, what am I supposed to be doing right now? I'm supposed to be looking over here, but I'm supposed to be managing this, and I have to be building this, and again, like, we can certainly talk about this for so long.
Yeah, I'm very much a turn-based player. I like being able to sit and contemplate. I want to do this and not that. Not to say I don't love RTSs. Oh, man. Played a great deal of the original Warcraft, Warcraft 2, and that came out and was very jealous. I love the folks at Westwood, the Castle, Elan Moral, these wonderful people over there back in the day doing awesome things. Lots of fun with their games. But for me as a designer, it's a little trickier. So I did a game called Noble Armada recently. Not my best effort, but it was what I call pausable real time. And it's basically things are going along, and then you can stop the game, change everything you want, start the game up again, get it going, stop it. It's basically set your own turn length. And I love it as for control from a player's point of view. So I get that mix. Obviously, it's horrible for multiplayer. Doesn't really work that way. But for a single player, having that kind of control gives me the visceral feel of an RTS while having the control of a turn-based game. So I'm a big fan of pausable real time when I can get it, when it still matters, when there's still ways to have important choices or to make important mistakes.
And while we're on the topic of RTS, I'm still very sad that we didn't see more developers like kind of look at Rise of Nations in terms of merging like turn-based or 4X design into a real-time game. Because, again, like, people who watch me, they know, like, I say, like, this is my all-time favorite, is a Rise of Nations in terms of that approach. And I think, like, to bring this into a greater conversation, I think there's room for, like, that kind of complexity and depth about having those 4X elements of setting borders and be able to negotiate. But it's how, I think, you present that to the player that is oftentimes where it gets very hard. Because again, like, as you were saying earlier, in terms of game design, like, this is something we can talk about like it's nothing. Just like if you have two, hardcore 4X fans talking about Masters of Orion or Solaris, they can talk about this stuff for hours on end. But from the outside, what the heck are they saying?
No, you're absolutely right with that. And I think there's still a great opportunity for RTSs. I'm sorry publishers don't fund them more. We were working with Talonsoft on the idea of doing some RTSs when they got bought by Take-Two. We did some stuff with Take-Two, but Take-Two didn't want to get into RTSs. So, and which was sad because they did some really good ones. But getting that publisher interest in them is more difficult than it should be. And there've been some RTSs we don't even remember. I have a hard time remembering that crashed and burned. They came out, they cost a bunch of money. They weren't all that incredible, and that's part of why publishers got turned off from them. But the fun that you can have in a Warcraft, in a Rise of Nations, obviously, we've named. Unfortunately, there need to be more of them to get publishers reinterested in them. They're not cheap to do. I mean, you've got to have really solid graphics, got to have really solid gameplay, and the AI in an RTS. That's not easy to do, to have it happening at a quick rate. And well, now you're not going to bog down machines, but in the late 90s, you could work on RTS AI that would suddenly put your machine to a crawl. Having it try and do pathfinding and healing and enemy selection and targeting all at the same time. Suddenly machines, a weak machine would not be happy dealing with that.
Yep, and I mean, when you look at games today, like Planetary Annihilation, that came out, I think it was like 2015, 2016. Like they just gave you like thousands of units across like an entire galaxy.
Right.
And even that was like bringing a lot of computers to their knees.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's an issue. Not as big an issue as now, but now the publishers aren't as interested in the space. And I think that's a mistake. There's a lot of good opportunities in the RTS space right now. A lot of things I'd love to see happen in an RTS space. So come on, Fallout RTS.
Again, like I'm writing my book on RTS design. My fear is that I'll finish the book next month. It'll go to publishing, and then like all the new RTS games will be announced, and my book will be day before it's even published.
Well, if you do, it'll be a win just for that.
Yeah.
That you'll have sparked it without meaning to. I'll take that. I'll take that trade. I'll take that trade off.
So, with Emperor of the Fading Suns, like with kind of like the enhanced edition that you're working on now, what kind of is going to make it like enhanced? Like for people listening to us at the moment, what's kind of making it special compared to the original release?
Sure. So the announcement we made is that it's coming to Steam. So please wishlist it on Steam, Emperor of the Fading Suns Enhanced. But the enhanced version is already available on GOG. Now we're doing a Steam version, which means putting in Steam API, Steam achievements, and all that sort of thing. So if people want to see a good bit of what's already enhanced, we have it up at GOG, but there are some major changes. So the number one thing that we focused on was improving the mod tools for modders. So we always had mod tools in the game. They were really cumbersome, hard to use, and we're very thankful to the folks who made the Hyperion Nova, other incredible mods, Emperor Wars, that really kept the game going when we turned on to other projects. But now anybody can mod very easily. I mean, it's a lot. It's text based. You go into our INI files. The INA files have commenting in there that explains what everything does. So you can change what every single unit can do. You can add units. We have I forget what it is, 100 or so different unit types in the base game, maybe more than that. But now modders can put it up to 999 unit types, way more than we did in the base game. They can add a whole lot more planets, technologies. Almost everything is moddable now. So that was the number one change. Just expand it. Now there's this the mods that are out there, Emperor Wars especially, are a lot of fun. People are having a great time with them, as well as with the base game, and more people are making their own mods as we speak. We did a lot of stability efforts to it. So we had done it in Borland in ancient tools that nobody even knows about and are certainly not supported anymore. So there's a big part of our effort was doing a Visual Studio just so it could be done with modern machines and we could work on it in a real way. That was a surprising change to it. We improved a lot of the tech abilities, the tech trees, went through a lot of the tweaks and changes that folks have asked for. To be honest, there are actually more than, I believe, 500 changes we've made to the old patched version with this new with the Emperor of the Fading Suns enhanced version, and it is significantly more fun, more challenge, more fun for multiplayer, a lot more fun with the mods as well, and really looking forward to adding these Steam APIs and achievements. But again, the main philosophy was modders have done incredible things. We want everybody to be able to mod it, and we're seeing people just trading around the INI files now. Look what I did with it, and that's really heartening to see people really jump into it on that level. So remember, I waited way too long to say this, but wishlist it on Steam today. Even if you already have it on GOG, you can wishlist it free on Steam. So please do.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about like modding, that's like another like entire like universe we could chat about. Like it has been fascinating to see just how much like the growth of the modding scene, not just for like strategy games, but just like games in general over the past 10 years. Like I follow Kaizo games or platformers. Yeah. I recently started looking into like the Doom modding scene, and that has just like blown my mind because I was writing my last book on shooters, so I play a few like the big name ones mentioned at the COG Awards, and like it just like surprised the heck out of me. Like that is where we're at in terms of modding, just for like a few of the ones that I played. And again, like strategy games, XCOM. I mean, the Firaxis XCOM games, and everyone remembers a Long War mod. Like that just like blew everyone's mind in terms of you can just create like another game on top of a game in that.
Well, the whole idea that Valve was originally a modding group that turned into Valve You and I were talking about Tripwire earlier, Tripwire Interactive here in Georgia, Killing Floor, Red Orchestra. Their Red Orchestra games, they're basically a mod team that have turned into an excellent development house and now a publisher as well. So I strongly encourage anybody to try their hand at modding any game that they love, especially Emperor of the Fading Suns. But really, any game, just jump into modding it. It is so fun to take something you already enjoy and put your own vision on top of it and say, hey, I did that. Nobody else has ever done this. Nobody else has ever done this.
Yep.
And that's just such a satisfying experience.
Yeah.
Most modding tools used to be horrendous to mess with. Now they're so easy. So easy. No excuse not to do some modding.
I still have like a memory of like one day like loading up like the StarCraft editor, like this like 99. Yeah. I was like, what the hell am I looking at here? And I just backed away from it.
Back SSI long ago released a war game construction set and all these other things. And this is before I was in the industry. And I was like, oh, I so want to do this. I want to make my own war games. I sit down and I know what I'm doing and I understand computers and I know what I'm doing here, but holy cow, is it a beast just to have a couple of Civil War units fight each other on a hex map. It was crazy. So yeah, the difference again on the tools and what you can do, that you can just go into my INI files, change a couple numbers around and have a whole different game experience. It's so sad. So, always remember to save the base INI files before you change them. You can get them again. You just go up to GOG and download them. Soon you'll go up to Steam and download them again. But always save your old files before you start the modding. But then mod like crazy. Then change everything and just be amazed at what happens as a result.
Yep. And I guess to talk a little bit more about kind of like how turn-based strategy and such has evolved. In terms of multiplayer, this has been something that's been like for me, like I haven't really dealt into this at all, but I have friends who you mentioned, of course, play by emailer. Like I remember doing like Soleum Infernum. Like this was like 7-8 years ago. And I guess for multiplayer wise, like these are games, again, as you are aware, I'm sure the audience is aware, they can take a very long time to play out. I guess, how do you balance these games or look at them in terms of multiplayer when it's, different people playing against each other versus just a single player versus the AI experience?
And the other problem is that when you're doing play by email, you're generally finding other friends who are dedicated strategy gamers. So that means that you're all at about the same talent level. That means that this can really become a long-term affair as you try and balance off who's going to beat the others. And then if one person's suddenly ahead, you got 4 people who can gang up against them and bring them right back down. So it can be absolutely crazy. What we find really satisfies a lot of players is they kind of come up with their own win conditions. I won't be Emperor, but I want to control the Imperial fleets at the end of the game. I want to be the one controlling the Imperial Eye. So these deals come out and people are setting up basically their own victory conditions, their own first, second, and third place sort of standings and so forth, and having a lot of fun doing it. One player is kind of pushing themselves and showing that they are the leader, and if you're not going to, you two aren't going to work with them, I'll work with the other 2 to become Emperor, that sort of thing. But that lets people claim the game again in their own ways. You can play it out, and a lot of folks do, where you're assassinating their nobles on Byzantium Secundus so they can't vote, and then you're winning, and then you're killing off all their nobles. And the game can end that way, and it will take a while. Or you make these deals, and people come up with what works for them as a satisfying point. And we don't want games to drag on past the point of we all know how it's going to end up. Everyone says, all right, that House Hawkwood is clearly going to be Emperor this game. House Hawkwood won, good job. And that's often how we see these end, kind of with that handshake agreement. And I love that. I don't think you should have to wait. When you've had your satisfying play with it, do it again, correct your mistakes, and make it work. And yeah, Ours is play by email style, or you can hot seat it, sit around the computer and have fun with it. The old days when we'd have one computer just running the game all day long, and we'd be working. I finished my turn. My turn. Run on over. I don't know if you remember CivNet, the first time Civilization tried to do multiplayer. That was an interesting approach. So trying to do these kind of games in a more real-time effort rather difficult, and really kills what I think is the best thing, which is that sitting and contemplating. But then I'm going to contradict myself, because I also love speed chess versions of strategy games. All right, you got 5 minutes to do your turn. I don't care how much you got to do. You got 5 minutes. Ding, go do it. And you run. I got to make sure I do the most important things first. Or if there's a chain of actions that have to happen, I got to do those right off the bat. And if I don't do it quickly, I'm messed up. That I do find that fun in turn-based games. But I've been involved in some of these games where everyone is kind of sitting around watching, just yelling at you while you're trying to do your turn very quickly, which obviously makes it no easier, but twice as much. So no one's come up with the great. So I don't think anyone's come up with a solution to the great question of how do we do synchronous, not asynchronous, but synchronous turn-based gaming. I have yet to see that really done well. I've seen folks where, all right, everyone has the same amount of time to do their turns. Once that time's up, turns get handled, get done, and then you come back in and plug out your answers. That was really the classical play-by-mail style, where everyone do their turns, send them into a referee who would then adjudicate them or run them through a computer to have them all operate at the same time. I'm still more partial to the play-by-email, especially among friends, where kind of the understanding is, yeah, all right, when we see who's going to win, we see who's going to win. We don't need to fight it out to the bitter end.
All right. As a bit of a time check, it's about 4:47. I know you have to get going by around 5. I have one last question I want to ask you, and then we'll kind of do wrap-ups. But again, Andrew, if you are free in the future, there's so many more topics I would love to chat with you about.
Absolutely. A lot of fun. Been a lot of fun talking.
So, I guess my final kind of design question for you, because again, this could be like a 20-minute, it's going to be like a 2-hour answer, depending on how we go. Another issue that I see with a lot of like turn-based or just like strategy games in general is kind of like when the management gets out of control. As you said before, like with Emperor of the Fading Sun, it is a game about that scale. You go from planet to kind of solar system to galaxy to universe. And one of the other things that can be very overwhelming is this idea of, now I have to pay attention to all of this, and if I didn't notice, this one planet over there who the tax rate is too high and they're revolting, it could completely screw up the entire system.
Right.
From a kind of strategy, from a design standpoint, what has been kind of your thoughts or your approach to trying to keep this manageable? That, the player can only focus on so many things at one time. How do you build, I guess, like the UI and the GUI to make it parsable or make it understandable when we get to this level of management?
Sure, and we want you to have universal management tools where you got one screen, show all your units, so you can quickly take a glance, and then the individual point by point and city by city management tools. So you've got your choices on how to handle what fits your style most effectively. One thing that we implemented in the game to keep from getting out of hand was that most units don't just take one turn to build. Some take 2, 3, 4, and that means units are cycling. I suddenly got 1 million units I didn't have last turn. You're always cycling through them, getting some units at a time. You know that more are on the way, and it's not suddenly I'm trying to deal with all my Zergs and send them off to do something that just popped into existence. There's another design choice that matters, which is don't let one little player mistake screw them for the entire game. You talked about revolts and taxes, and that's a key part of Emperor of the Fading Suns. You set your tax rate. You know how that impacts the loyalty. You're dealing with the religious issues. The religious issues, if you start changing sects, can start impacting the loyalty of folks on the planet where they didn't used to believe that faith, and now you're forcing it down their throats. Or if you're less inclined toward the church, you can be skimming the tithe from them, and suddenly the church is spreading nasty words about you. So there are lots of different ways where suddenly you can start getting in trouble and having revolts. But you give players clues about it. You try to keep any one mistake from being absolutely game ending. If they have a revolt, it shouldn't end anything. We generally will just have some new new rebel units pop up that you have to deal with, and you're unhappy. And you're at risk of losing cities if you don't deal with that quickly. But it's a fun little challenge that gets you outside of your grand strategy. And again, it is, how do you get those warnings going? We have audio effects to let people know. You start hearing boos when you're changing things around that are impacting your rate. One of the changes we did for enhanced is now you know exactly what the percentages are of how popular and unpopular you are. So you know that you're starting to be at risk of rebellion. If you don't want to deal with rebellion, you can turn it off. That was the other thing. We've got all of these on switches. I can't believe I forgot this. So I talked about having to get your resource where you want. If you want to do minute resource control, you can do that. Or you just turn Universal Warehouse on, and it doesn't matter where your resources are. They're just kind of in this big bank pool, and they get used. Or you have to ship them to exactly where they need to get used. You can turn Rebellion on or off. We've got Plague in the game. You can turn Plague on and off. I wish I could have done that during the pandemic. Yeah. But unfortunately, I didn't have access to those controls at the time. See, that's why you need better modder controls. Folks can do that. So we try and give players a lot of control over. Flip these on. If you want to deal with Rebellion, you can flip it on. If you don't want to mess with that, you turn it off, and you can now just adjust these things for maximum resource control, not worrying about planet happiness and the like. And that makes a huge difference. The more player control you can give, the better. And that was definitely our idea when we started with EFS. Give them control over all these things. And if you want to play at the hardest level, turn that Universal Warehouse off, turn Rebellion on, turn Plague on, go crazy. And turn it all to ridiculous level, because we actually do have ridiculous level in there as a difficulty. Go have a lot of fun. That will be one of the Steam achievements. If you actually win on ridiculous, you deserve achievement.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And it sounds really fascinating, again, to look at these games at like that level of scale, making it parsable, at the universal scale, and even just, as we started at, like just like individual units fighting on a planet. And I have to imagine, again, like that's definitely one of the appeals of 4X games for a lot of people. This idea, again, that I can watch this little battle on this one planet, I can watch this war over here in this other galaxy, and I am controlling everything. And like I said, like I have friends who love like Masters of Orion, Total War, what was the other one? Europa Universalis, Dolores, you name it. And again, like these games, like they're like the closest to like what people like call like the infinite game. Like if you get into them, you can play them like day in, day out, and you'll never have like the same experience twice.
That's exactly right. I've been live streaming this a number of times, and every playthrough is very different and thematically appropriate. I have these great stories that get formed during the playthroughs. Just weird things happen, and every time is different, and that is absolutely one of the great pleasures. Then if it's not different enough, you can mod them, random maps, change the settings, everything, and have a whole different playthrough of it. It's interesting because we always talk about the idea like a great game experience. We want 20 to 40 hours of game play time is a good exchange for your dollars. Obviously, you go to a movie, you get 2 hours of pleasure. We want games to give you a good bit more. But really, the best games, the Civilizations, the Machiavelli Princes, We Think Emperor of the Fading Suns, you have hundreds upon hundreds of hours and beyond. We've got people who've been playing this since the late 90s, since the mid-90s, and are still playing Emperor of the Fading Suns. And part of that is because of the modders changing stuff around in it. That's the greatest endorsement I can imagine. Just there are folks who have been playing this game for so long and still love it.
All right, but I know we are about to hit time, and again, we can talk about this for hours. And then, any final points about Emperor of the Fading Suns you want to mention in terms of what's special about it, what's coming in the Enhanced Edition, anything like that?
As you can tell, I'm crap at the marketing side of this job, so wishlist Emperor of the Fading Suns Enhanced. Buy it on GOG. It's only $5.99 now. There will be a new version when we get the Steam stuff up, so you want to check that out as well. But it is only $5.99, so grab it on GOG. There are very active communities on Discord who love it and are involved in it. It will help you with the modding. I've got a lot of videos up on it. We've been seeing more videos popping up on Emperor of the Fading Suns. So check it out on all of them, and we know you'll have a great time with it. Really appreciate being on the podcast today.
And again, like this stuff is my bread and butter. Talking about design, I can do this for hours. And the people watching this record right now, they know that's not a bluff right there. But as I said earlier, Andrew, it has been an absolute pleasure. If you are free in the future, there's still so much I would love to chat with you about. And I definitely want to talk about like a the tabletop RPG side as well, because
Sure, absolutely.
that's another universe that is very unknown to me that people have been trying to get me into. So definitely want to get your thoughts on that. So as someone who's also bad at marketing, I also want to give you a chance. Anything social media wise you want to mention about your game, your studio, anything?
I'm HDI Andrew almost everywhere. That's Holistic Design Incorporated Andrew. So go on Blue Sky. I'm HDI Andrew. There's a great Fading Suns group on Facebook that you can join. I think we started making the Emperor of the Fading Suns Discord group more publicly available, so you can find that in the GOG forums. I don't know if I put it up in the Steam forums yet. I need to look at it there. But Emperor of the Fading Suns enhanced on Steam. Please do check it out. Oh, I mentioned the YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/Georgia Game Devs, DEVS. Georgia spelled out Game Devs. So check it out. A lot of EVS videos there and a lot of videos on all aspects of game development.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do you have anything you want to say to the fans of Emperor before we wrap up for today?
Thank you for putting up with us for 27 years. Glad we could get you the 25th anniversary version, and look forward to more stuff. And I hope to play you in a 5-player game sometime.
Nice. And do you have any upcoming projects or anything you can tease for people watching?
Well, if you are in Georgia, we just had our Best in Georgia contest for the colleges. We are hosting a lot of the indies at the Dorville Digital Studio on May 14th. And that's a prelude to the big MomoCon. That's a 50,000 person anime show with a good indie game focus, where we'll have a lot of our games being shown on the MomoCon floor. And of course, October 4th to 6th, Siege will again be combined with DreamHack at the Georgia World Congress Center. So expect another 50,000 people all playing games together and join us there.
Fantastic. All right, Andrew, I will let you go for today, but like I said, definitely don't be a stranger. I would love to have you back on for another conversation.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Take care.
You too. All right, so with that said, everyone, we're going to wrap things up for today's show. If you're new, do the YouTubing stuff. Check out the Discord and the Patreon. Buy all my design books. Check out all of Andrew's links down below. And again, if you are a developer working on an upcoming game or just want to chat game design, I am always looking for guests, new, old, whatever. So please reach out. With that said, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where you examine the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.